But my childhood, from a very young age, I remember uh, I would have visitations at night. So I would have demons visiting me from as long as I can remember up to the age of maybe 8 or 9. So every night I would either wet the bed or wake up in the middle of the night and go up to my parents' house, to my parents' bed, and I would sleep with them because I would just couldn't sleep. Um, and that pulled into school as well. So because of my lack of sleep, I was very on edge. I was uh, kind of brought up on survival mode. So I kind of had to fend for myself every second of every day, either at home, because my sometimes my dad would come back home and we wouldn't know. We would be scared of our father because we wouldn't know if there would be an explosion because he was stressed due to work or because he had difficult times. So the climate of our family was pretty hardened in terms of um, God, in terms of just open communication, open conversations, talking about emotions, talking about feelings. So from a very young age, I was taught, me and my sister were taught to kind of bottle up those emotions, and just bury them without either feeling them completely or even communicating them, because even when it came to the bullying, the blame would always come upon me. So I would get in fights because people would bully me, and at some point I just wanted to defend myself, and I would be the one that the finger would be pointed at. So it kind of reinforced this idea that everything was always my fault and that I was the bad kid, I was the bad child. And as I grew up, that took more and more space in the subconscious and started to pull into decisions. But one of the key events in my childhood was at the age of 9, our house burned down. Um, and for weeks and months before, which is really prophetic and kind of um, something between me and my dad. And later on, when I came to Christ, God kind of showed me that it was kind of a prophetic warning, where me and my dad had this thing where he would draw in my back sometimes, and that would cool me down before going to bed. And he would always draw this house very specifically. But the weeks prior to the house burning down, he started to, for some reason, I started to ask him to draw a fire truck and a police car. And for weeks and weeks, he drew the same house with a river behind and a gazebo. He drew the fire truck and he drew the police car. And when the house burned down, I remember clearly that at that point I felt like my innocence was really stolen from me. And I know a lot of men and a lot of children can testify to that, because of a traumatic event for me was my house burning down. But the first thing I told my parents was, give me my shoes, I want to go play my soccer game, which for a 9-year-old makes absolutely no sense. But I kind of, because of my innocence being stolen at that point, it's kind of like I had to grow up and toughen up at a young age and just bottle those things inside of me, because my parents didn't really have any tools or framework or relationship with Christ to guide me through that. So that was a really hard part of my childhood. And then I started, after, not too long after, I would say, I started getting attacks and thoughts being planted in my head about sexuality, which from 9 to 10 years old is pretty weird. But I would spot like movies and sexual scenes would start to have a weird effect on me at that moment. And that kind of uh, grew exponentially in the next coming years until I started getting into pornography at the age of 12 and masturbation and all these things. And from the age of 12 up until I'd say the age of 24, that was probably that was one of the biggest addictions that I had to deal with at that time. But I also started drinking heavily. So I was drinking Jack Daniels and Coke at the age of 14, and I would walk around at night, just me and my two friends. We would just get really, and we would get really, really bad drinking that Jack Daniels and Coke. And then I started smoking weed at the age of 14 as well. So drug abuse started very early on, and it grew into, hard drugs. So MDMA, psychedelics, and that grew over time. And my tolerance to drugs was actually pretty astounding. So I could take a lot of drugs and still have some form of mental capacity. I didn't really lose control all that much. And I know that was a way of God protecting me at that point, because I'm pretty sure I would have died a couple times, either from the drug abuse or the foolishness that I was getting into. I remember coming back one night from an electronic dance music festival, and I had taken I had taken maybe like 3 pills, and I had driven back, and I don't even remember how I got back to the condo. And when I came to Christ, God showed me that He had sent angels that night just to get me home. But that's just to show the level of drug abuse that I was in. And um, so high school, in terms of drug abuse and alcohol abuse, then came the women in my life. So I had a lot of heartbreaks. I lived a lot of rejection from women. And that hardened me even more, where I came to a point where I was about 18 or 19, where I decided I didn't want to be the one picked on, and that I would be the one to, control or manipulate these women. And that's when the witchcraft actually started. It didn't start when I got into astrology. It didn't start when I got into tarot. It actually started when I wanted to exert my own will on other people, because I didn't want to get hurt anymore, which stems from the whole childhood thing. So I was kind of taught and brought up in witchcraft without really knowing it, and I was initiated at a young age without knowing it. But it was later on when COVID hit that I got really deeper into spiritual practices. So meditation, I'm an avid reader, so I read, I don't know, tens or hundreds of books on personal development, astrology, tarot cards, meditation, chakras. Um, and that's when things really started to take a shift, where I was seeing fruit in my life. And fruit, I mean the fruits of darkness, where I could easily manipulate people into doing my will. I could have any women that I wanted. And that brought a sense of validation that was fueling that drive to dive deeper into that manipulation and that coercion. And so childhood was really the training ground and the birthing ground of, hatred, self-hatred, anger, resentment, and bitterness, and rejection, abandonment, and just a lot of anger piled up inside that Satan would use later down the road to, cause damage and cause just trap souls. Without being a full-blown witch, I know that my role in manipulating these women and coercing these women, and also, just people in general, participated in a lot of people suffering a lot of deeper trauma, and me just continuing the cycle of trauma. So when I came to Christ, that was something that, and He's still dealing with that today, where that brokenness is still being cleansed by the blood of Christ. But that's kind of, if I had to kind of go over, that's pretty much it. But
Wow.
I think I'd add one more thing, which I which I always forget. But one pretty dark time of my life was when I was about 18 or 19, was where I got really my heart broken for really, really bad. Like, that was pretty, in terms of the significant events in my life, I'd say like the fire and that heartbreak were the two catapulting moments in terms of being plunged into deeper darkness. And after that heartbreak, I really got bad into drug abuse, and I found myself working at funeral homes for about a year and a half. So I found myself.
Show your tattoo.
Yeah, I'll show it after, but I have a bunch of tattoos as well. But this is basically the god, the Egyptian god of the underworld, which I got after working at the funeral home. But basically, I would be in charge of, driving people to the cemetery. I would be in charge of going to the morgue and just getting the bodies out of the hospitals. I also found myself once going to just a home where this man had lost his mother, and we had to take the body out, and even just putting people in the fire and just grinding bones, and and all that time I was still manipulating women and doing so many drugs. I remember a weekend that it was the last time I did like really, really hard drugs, and I had done maybe 12 pills in 3 days. And for the next 2 weeks, I just remember I just wanted to die so bad, and I thought I was dying. And looking back, I know that weekend was really a portal for really deep demonic oppression and demonic invasion in my temple at that time. Just because of all the electronic music, which is heavily demonically infiltrated, and mixing that with drugs and lust and all these things, that weekend it really shattered something inside of me. And I was pretty much an open vessel at that point, where the spiritual practices and all those things, plus the heartbreak that had just happened, really plunged me in there. And so that's kind of childhood and high school up until the age of 2021. And then I went on a 3 to 4 year spiritual journey in terms of, like I said, astrology. I could guess people's signs, and I could manipulate people based off of their signs, and tarot cards. I did that, and chakras and all these things, and meditation. And uh, and then I got pretty much, I mean, that's pretty much childhood.